Let me take it from here. Hey everyone, I hope you're having a good Saturday so far. Let me introduce you to the Identity Platform, or IDP. Next slide, please. So I'm Guha. I'm originally from Kolkata, India. I joined Mercari IDP this year on January 1st. I've been a software engineer for over 9 years, mainly in the domains of e-commerce, geodata, and now IDP. Next slide, please. So what is the purpose of IDP? The purpose is to provide appropriate authentication, access control, and data protection to the entirety of the Mercari Group services in a very standard way. Next slide, please. So let me explain what does that mean. So what is appropriate? It means that it has to be sufficiently strong. It means that we should follow the principle of least privilege, which means users are only given as much privilege as they need according to their role or their function. It means that we should only collect and use the minimal amount of data that we require. And it also means that logged in users should not be able to be tracked from outside on the basis of how their data is moving or how they are accessing the system. And the reason for doing all of these things in a standard way is because authentication and authorization is a basic functionality in any service. So the keyword is versatility. As Mercari grows and new services are launched, every service should be able to use our authentication authorization features out of the box. Also, authorization authentication is an important core feature directly related to security. So we need it to be safe. And again, safety is one of the reasons we need it to be standard. Next slide, please. So the obvious question in your mind as an engineer might be, why do we need an ID platform? Like we could just develop authorization authentication for like your own services. And I'm sure many of you have done that. Next slide, please. So to explain that, let me introduce you to my co-speaker and colleague, Utkarsh, who has been in IDP since 2019. Take it away, Utkarsh.
Hello, everyone. So, am I audible? I think so. Okay. So I hail from Jaipur in India. I graduated from IIT Roorkee in 2018, and right after that, I joined Mercari. After working in Mercari for a year, I moved to the ID platform team. And since then, I've been working here. So I will be explaining a little bit of the history why we developed the ID platform. Can you move to the next slide? So back in 2017, Mercari architecture looked quite simple. We used to have a Mercari API, which was a big monolith. Obviously, it was complicated inside, but from outside, it looked kind of like this. And we have two types of clients, web and native. Native included the iOS app and the Android app. But most of all these clients, they belong to the Mercari group, and there were no outside clients. Next slide, please. So at that time, if the user is using Mercari app, they were issued a Mercari access token, which we call as MAT in our company. And that Mercari access token is linked to the Mercari user when they log in. And when they want to access something, do some payment, we verify that Mercari access token on the Mercari app itself. So one thing to notice here is that there is no fine-grained authorization, like all the Mercari access tokens are equal. So if I issue a Mercari access token to a client, they can do everything. They can do payment, they can use Merpay, they can buy things, sell things. So there is no fine-grained authorization and access control. Next slide, please. Yeah, so after 2017, as we have seen in the previous presentations, there were some changes. Change number one was the migration to the microservice environment. We wanted to develop a lot of features faster. So we moved to microservice environment. And also there was a requirement to support clients other than the Mercari app itself. We wanted to show our products on third-party e-commerce website, on some websites to sell them outside of Japan, etc. So we had these two changes after that. Can you move to the next slide? So for the change number one, when we migrated to the microservice environment, we had two new issues. First one was, where should we do the authentication authorization? Should we still do it in Mercari API? And also how to share information between these small different microservices. Next slide, please. And the other issue was about the clients, that we had multiple clients. So we wanted a way to issue them tokens. We cannot, users cannot enter their ID and password on third-party clients and don't give them access using Mercari access token. So we had to provide a way for it. And also we had to provide fine-grained access to them, that, okay, you can only view the products, that's all, something like that. Next slide. So from our humble beginnings, we migrated to the microservice environment. Now we had a gateway, which we had several microservices. Of course, we had the Mercari API, and we had gateway, which acts as a reverse proxy, and we now have an authority service. Next slide. So in this architecture, we come back to the original problems, that, okay, where are we supposed to do the authentication? How to share the information between different services? Next slide. So to solve this issue, what we started doing is we received the Mercari access token on the gateway, and then the gateway layer checks the MAT and calls the authority service to authenticate this Mercari access token and issue a private access token, which is then used inside the Kubernetes cluster between different microservices. Next slide. So overall, the process to issue the MAT is still the Mercari access token is still the same, just access the monolith and get the MAT from there, but the verification process was changed. It now goes through gateway and the authority service, and the authority service in the background, authority service is still calling the Mercari API, but there are certain caching layers and circuit breaking in between to make it much more stable than before. And then we issue the private access token, which is then used inside the cluster. Okay, next slide. So in this, as I said before, that the issuance process is still the same, using the monolith and all. But the since we have the private access token and it has certain claims like subject ID or subject ID type, basically user ID and user ID type, we call them subject. So each of the microservice, they can put restriction based on the subject ID type, that, okay, we only allow Mercari users to access this endpoint, or we can only allow user 123 to access the information of user 123 and not other users. So the microservices, they can put this kind of access control when they receive a call by checking the PAT. Okay, next slide. So that was about the use cases related to Mercari users accessing the Mercari API, but there were certain other use cases like what if we have a bad job running in the background? It doesn't have any Mercari access token. How do we issue a private access token to it? So what we have is each microservice, they are linked to a Google service account. So we use that Google service account to issue a Google ID token to it. And the Google ID token serves as the identity of the microservice, and which is then issued a private access token based on the Google ID token. Then that private access token is used to call other microservices, and they know that, okay, this microservice is calling us. We only provide this data to this particular microservice, so it is okay. If other service is calling, don't allow. And then secondly, there was another use case for the CS tool. The customer support team, they need to access user data. So for them to access user data, we again went back kind of similar approach. Users do their Google login, they get a Google ID token, and then we use that Google ID token to issue them employee token. And then again, this employee token is used to call the gateway. Gateway calls authority, and we change this Google ID token with private access token. So again, inside the cluster, we only handle private access tokens. Okay, next slide, please. So to summarize the history to now, the Mercari access token acts as an external token, and the token issuing process is kind of same as before, but the token verification process involves certain other layers to make it more stable. And the external token, Mercari access token, is converted to internal token, private access token, which is then used by each of the microservices and is also used for authorization. And we are also replacing the Mercari access token with another platform access token, which will provide us more fine-grained authorization outside the cluster as well. So yeah, that's all from my part. Over to you, Guha. Next slide, please.
Yeah, thank you, Utkarsh, for that deep dive into the lore of Mercari IDP. So now let me tell you guys briefly about what are the projects that we are actually working on right now. So what is IDP team working on? We are working on replacing our access tokens with industry standard OAuth2 access tokens, also known as platform access tokens. We are also working on authenticating across multiple clusters. As Mercari's businesses grow, we deploy new services in other clusters, and we need authentication to work across them. We are adding additional authentication methods, biometric methods like FIDO, which is a one-stop solution for phishing prevention. We are also trying to become a part of the FIDO Alliance, which is an open industry alliance whose goal is to reduce the use of passwords. We are also working on automation in onboarding OIDC clients. We are working in fine-grained authorization, which is only allowing privilege to users as they require it. So next slide, please. Now let me introduce you to the lovely people who are working on all these projects. This is the ID platform team. We have 11 members from 9 countries. So we are super diverse. We have 1 engineering manager, 1 tech lead, 3 product managers, and 6 backend engineers. And as of now, all of us are based in Japan. So that brings me to the next slide, please, which is probably the most important slide in my deck. We are hiring. And who are we looking for? We are looking for ID professionals who can already bring their expertise and experience in this domain to lay the foundation of the IDP team, which we will make in India. So that's all from my side. Thank you so much.